Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. AM 560 Weather Center forecast. Partly sunny, warm. A thunderstorm is possible in parts of the area by the afternoon and a high of 88. 62 right now. Next news at 9, and Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. When you've got questions, he always has an answer. It's Sean Hannity this afternoon at 2 on AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. George Will over the weekend on Clinton Foundation Donor Zero's show, talking about the proposed 1-6 commission, 9/11 style. You know,
were you surprised by his answer?
No, but I've liked George Will for so long. It's tough to listen to him say things that are so silly. And what he said over the weekend is really silly, even more so about the Republican Party than about the 9/11 style commission for January 6th.
Well, it's controversial for one reason. We have something new in American history. That is a political party defined by the terror it feels for its own voters. That's the Republican Party right now. Every elected official is frightened of his voters, therefore doesn't respect his voters, doesn't like his voters, and is afraid that a vote for this will be seen as an insult to the 45th president. There's no reason, McConnell has a point. There are going to be lots of investigations. Journalists are going to go through this. There are 450-some criminal charges now being brought, with 100 more probably to come. So there's going to be lots of information about this. I would like to see January 6th is burned into the American mind as firmly as 9/11, because it was that scale of shock to the system.
Who are we going to be ringing the bell for in honor of their deaths? First of all, come on, you can't compare those two.
Well, there's two things. There's comparing January 6th to 9/11, and there's the underlying thing that he said, that a Republican Party, office holders terrorized by their voters. Most politicians are not philosophical. They respond to pressure. Most of them are human weather vanes. So the idea that politicians would respond to where the zeitgeist is within their party, that's new in American politics? No, that's endemic to our representative republic. Because there are Trump supporters who are loyal, number one, and number two, feel like they got cheated in November of last year, number two. And they're angry, and then their angry now doubles down with the expected Marxist overreaches of the Biden administration, that this is new in American politics. It's just not. And I'm not a Pulitzer Prize winner like George Will, and I haven't written all the books that George Will has written, and he's a very smart guy, and he's a very knowledgeable guy, and he's a great historian. But he is so, like so many never-Trumpers, so blinded by his antipathy for Trump that he stops making sense. And I just don't understand that sort of blindness about a politician. He's out now. So, talk about something that's current. Talk about something prospective, what you tell politicians to do all the time. And your big prospective idea, George, is a 9/11 style 1-6 commission so you can listen to more bloviating and gaslighting and general hysteria from the left. That's how we're going to permanently emblazon 1-6 on the nation's psyche.
What does he want, a holiday, a national holiday?
For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by James Bovard. He's a member of the USA Today Board of Contributors, frequent contributor to The Hill, and contributing editor for American Conservative. James, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So the 1-6 commission as proposed, and the comments of luminaries like George Will on the topic?
You know, it's sad to see how so many people are trying to put a halo over the U.S. Congress and the entire political process. There were folks who behaved very badly in January 6th. If people violently attack the cops, fine, prosecute them hardly. But there's been a huge effort to try to consecrate the entire Congress and the entire political process and pretend that this was a threat to democracy, a threat to the republic. It wasn't. It was basically it was a bunch of protesters who got out of control, thanks in large part to the Capitol Police complete failure, which is now being exposed. But it's interesting. There are 14,000 hours of video film that was captured inside the Capitol that the government is not disclosing. I mean, show us the film and we'll have a lot better idea of how much of a real danger that was. But what's happening is that the government is covering that up at the same time that Nancy Pelosi wants to have a rigged commission, an independent commission chosen by politicians that's supposedly going to give us the answer.
Well, we talked about some of that footage last week with Julie Kelly over at Am Greatness, American Greatness, amgreatness.com. And some of the footage, this is obviously just a snippet. The federal government released a couple snippets, too, of the melee outside the Capitol. But the footage that has been seen, it is public, includes a couple of the guys that breached the Capitol, including that QAnon shaman dude, saying, hey, the police are working with us. We have to be peaceful here, so on and so forth. They're not going to mess with us. We just have to be peaceful. So, again, they shouldn't have been in the Capitol. But that really casts the situation in a different light when you had apparent complicity with some of the Capitol Police with some of what was done.
Yeah, and yet this has been buried by most of the press coverage and most of the members of Congress and the pundits. But, you know, they have chosen to exploit this to claim that there was a dire threat, and they're trying to use that to push through a new federal law that would would give the feds more hammers to drop down on people who are dissidents or critical. But, you know, something else that's a huge, farce in this element, people were talking about the 9/11 Commission should be a model for this. People have forgotten how the 9/11 Commission was a complete charade and some of the worst bootlicking in modern Washington history.
Right, and also, too, then, and this is important, I think this is where you're going, which is then what comes out of the commission when they issue their blue ribbon report is very questionable legislation, especially in retrospect, like the Patriot Act.
Very much. And to step back to the 9/11 Commission, people, almost nobody paid attention to the disclosures that happened years after that commission issued its report during Bush's reelection campaign. And it turns out that a lot of their information came from torture. I mean, Philip Shannon, New York Times guy, did a book on the uncensored history of the 9/11 investigation and pointed out that what that commission did was kept asking the CIA to go back to the detainees, interrogate them more, and get answers which the commission put in their report, even though it was known at that point that the CIA had used torture. So you have this, you have this federal report which is put on a pedestal, but it relied on torture to get a lot of key information, and it also covered up the Saudi role in 9/11, which was even worse. But George Bush was campaigning, claiming that the Iraq War was justified in part because of Saddam Hussein's vague ties to 9/11. You had the Saudis, you had evidence that the Saudis had funded some of the hijackers in 9/11, 15 of 19 who were Saudis, but that was buried by the 9/11 Commission.
Well, and
that was an outrage.
Well, here's something else, too. I mean, think about that. So the Patriot Act is sold, these enhanced surveillance powers and so forth, sold as, this is the way to prevent another 9/11. So, of course, you're going to have the American people go along with that because there, I think, was more trust in those agencies to protect us from enemies that were foreign and domestic, I guess you could say, since they were here.
News media trusted them. I didn't, but
right,
anyhow.
Right. But so now, so thinking about the commission that led to something like that, now in the present context, with the standing that the CIA and the FBI enjoy among at least half the country at present, which I would say is greatly diminished from 15 years ago, now think about trying to move a continued expansion of power for those spy and law enforcement agencies coming out of this commission's recommendations or quote unquote findings, and how dangerous that could be.
Absolutely, and a huge point here is that we have no idea of how intrusive the surveillance already is, because you got the Biden administration pushing to sign up a new army of informants who would be able to violate federal law and the Constitution by targeting people, even though there was no grounds for targeting them. It'd be basically targeting people based on their freedom of speech. Folks who criticize the government would be targeted. There was a story I did a week or two ago for American Conservative that talked about how the informants had gotten out of control in earlier times, and there were stories. There was a former FBI informant who talked about how he was sent into mosques in California to basically meet women and then do secret audio tapes of their pillow talk after having sex with them. I mean, and this was approved by the FBI. And so if this is what they're already doing, good Lord, what are they going to do next?
Well, it's like the people that were arrested at the Capitol, they're being held as political prisoners because they're not even letting them out on bond, and they didn't kill anybody. I mean, here in Chicago, we have 90 people who committed murders who are on electronic monitoring out on the streets.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
thought the
amazing
government was
the way
doing
they're
so well there in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm
yeah.
surprised you're surprised. Yeah, right. Wanted to get to another piece that you wrote. You asked the question, at what point does a democracy become a kleptocracy? And the answer is when it starts to mimic Illinois, which is what we're doing.
Yeah, this is a story last week I did about red light cameras and how they were, well, first of all, they're totally unconstitutional, as the Missouri Supreme Court said, because it forces drivers to prove they're innocent, violation of the Fifth Amendment. But you have these red light cameras, and politicians have gone nuts because they're like it's like an ATM to raise money for the government. And you've had in a lot of places what the politicians have done once these cameras are in place is shorten the yellow lights so they can write more tickets, even though this guarantees there's going to be a lot more traffic accidents. People are getting killed thanks to these policies so the politicians can raise revenue.
Well, isn't that, yeah, I mean, we had the issue with the shorting of the yellow lights in violation of city ordinance and state law in Illinois with the red light cameras. But here's the larger pullback, too, on this, which I know you appreciate. This is sold to enhance safety. All things for safety. We're going to increase taxes on cigarettes for your safety. We're going to red light camera you and speed camera you for your safety. Everything is, we're going to take more out of your back pocket for your safety. The first part is true. The second part is not true because we've already budgeted for and spent the money we expect to extract from that back pocket.
Yeah, and something which mystifies me is why people would trust politicians for these programs to safeguard their safety. At the same time, there have been so many convictions and arrests in Illinois of government officials who got bribes for setting up these red light cameras.
Well, but the paradox, people just, I guess, don't think through this. So you don't want me to do something, but you're also counting on me to do it because you've budgeted for and spent the money that you expect to realize.
Yeah, it's it's like government spending is the ultimate magic wand that's going to fix every problem. Too bad it hasn't worked so far, but next year sure it's going to work.
Mm-hmm. Wait, a few trillion more, James. Just a few trillion more.
Well, it's amazing to see that there's so little backlash in the media from all these new boondoggles that are being unleashed. All these programs that are boosting unemployment, that are turning vast numbers of people into government dependence. I mean, there are so many Pandora's boxes that are being opened right now.
Pandemic relief. It's pandemic relief.
Right.
How could you be against pandemic relief? People are hurting. They're flush with cash, but they're hurting. Their household incomes are up, but they're hurting. Okay. Jim Bovard, member of the USA Today Board of Contributors, frequent contributor to The Hill, contributing editor for American Conservative as well. Thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks so much.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey Top Pro Answer line.
If you're talking about it, Dan and Amy are talking about it. It's Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
So I invested in one of those fancy new exercise bikes, and this thing is just really impressive. And without a doubt, a very special tool to help me get healthier. The problem is 3 days go by, then 4, and I've done nothing. And then it's night 5, and I'm sitting at the kitchen table, and I look down at myself, and I can't help but just laugh.